In this video, I will be covering the inserting of records into a table in a MySQL database. Furthermore, I will be covering the selecting of data from tables that are already populated in a MySQL database. To start off with, let us know that my currently active database is ns_nickel, and within that database, I have a variety of tables. The table that I am going to be working on is student. This student table has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns: student ID, first name, last name, student GPA, and major. This table was created using a create table statement. To insert data into this table, we need to use another SQL statement known as insert into. The insert into statement allows us to insert data into a table. In this case, we want to insert data into the student table. Please note that MySQL or SQL is case sensitive. And into the student table, I need to specify the columns into which I want to insert data. The columns are student ID, first name, last name, student GPA, and major. Into this table, I want to insert specific values, and the values that I want to insert are as follows. Student ID, if I remember correctly, student ID is a variable character data type. One can inspect the data types by pulling up this drawer, and one sees that for the student table, the columns are student ID, first name, last name, student GPA, and major. Student ID is varchar 10. It's a 10-character field, and since it's variable character, we need to enclose it within quotes. In this case, I'm going to pick that is 10 characters long. The second thing we need to insert is the first name. The next thing, last name. Then the student GPA should be a decimal, and since it's a decimal, we don't need it in quotes. And the last piece of information is the major. That should also be within quotes. One can use either single quotes or double quotes for SQL. While I've used double quotes over here, I can replace these double quotes with single quotes, and they would work just as well. Now, one cannot alternate single quotes and double quotes, so whatever you choose, make sure you stick with it. If you prefer single quotes, use single quotes. If you prefer double quotes, use double quotes. To execute this statement, one again has to leave their cursor on this line and click on the lightning bolt with the cursor through it. As one can see, that statement has inserted a record into the table. We should now have a record corresponding to this student in our table student. If one wants to insert another record into the same table, one will actually have to take the same piece of code, copy it once again. Now, since student ID is the primary key, one needs to make sure that the value in the primary key is different. In this case, I've changed that to 112. This is my second record in the table. Again, to execute this line, one can hit the lightning bolt with the cursor through it. Another option is one can execute this specific line by leaving one's cursor here and using some keyboard shortcuts. One of the keyboard shortcuts to execute that specific line is Command Enter on a Macintosh or Control Enter on a Windows machine. As we can see, that line has successfully executed. One row is affected, and so now we have two rows in that student table. Another way to insert data into the table might be to do it like this. One can specify only the values that need to be inserted. If one is specifying only the values, one needs to make sure that the order in which the data is inserted corresponds to the order of the columns. And once one executes that line, one sees that that line is also inserted, that record is already inserted into the table. This is how one goes about inserting data into a table. While inserting data is interesting, it's more interesting and in fact more fruitful to actually get data out of tables. That is known as querying a table. To start off with, let us see how do we get all the data that is actually present in a table out. To select data in a table, we have to learn another SQL statement. It's known as the select statement. The select statement is the bread and butter of a data analyst. Select star selects all the columns and all the rows in the table. Select star from the table name. In this case, the name of the table is student, and so we want to select all the data from the table student. Select star from student is the structure of select statements, and we will be building on the structure over time. To execute the statement, Command Enter, and now we can see that the student table, we inserted 3 rows of data, and we have 3 rows of data out here. Student ID, first name, last name, student GPA, and their major. We see all the data that is now present in the student table. While the student table has only 3 rows of data, we have other databases within our database server that actually contain more data. Let us use one of those databases. For the purposes of this course, we will be relying on the text database. So let's go ahead and use the text database. Execute that line, and one notices that the text database gets highlighted. To pull data from the text database, let's pick a table. One of the tables within the text database is a table known as share, S-H-A-R-E. We're now going to pull data from the share table in the text database. Type in select star from share, semicolon, execute that line, and all the data in the share table is provided to us. As we can see, the query select star from share allows us to query the share table and get all its contents out and display it. We can see that the share table has a couple of different columns. There's a column called share code, SHR code, SHR firm, SHR price, SHR quantity, SHR dividend, and SHR PE, or price to earnings ratio. These are the 6 columns that are present in the share table. We can also see that once that query executes, the response tells us the number of rows in that table. There are 14 rows returned. There are 14 rows right here. One might be interested in picking specific columns from the table. To do that, one simply needs to type in the names of the columns. Select, for instance, SHR firm, and SHR price, 2 columns from the table share. Now, while I'm writing this on multiple lines, one can write this on one line. I'm executing the statement, and one sees that we have the 2 columns selected. One can also pick specific rows from a table. Select star allows me to pick all the columns from the table share. The where clause after the from statement allows me to pick specific rows from a table. Let's say I want all the columns or all the shares from the share table where the price of the shares are greater than 30. If I run this, I will see that I have 7 rows returned, and for these 7 rows, I have all of the different columns. In fact, one can combine multiple conditions simultaneously. I can say select star from share where the SHR price is greater than 30 and include another condition where the share price to earnings ratio is greater than 10. This allows me to have multiple conditions, giving me fewer rows, in this case 4. Just like one can use the AND operator, one can also use the OR operator, such as select star from share where the SHR price is greater than 30 or the SHR, let's say for instance, quantity is less than 2000. In this case, it gives me some shares where there is fewer quantity than 2000. Sometimes one might want to select specific columns and specific rows. In that case, one can combine a select and a where clause. Select, let's say SHR firm, SHR price, and SHR dividend from the share table where certain conditions are met, such as SHR price is greater than 30. This allows me to combine column restrictions in addition to a row restriction. So I can pick specific columns and specific rows from a table. When one queries on the primary key, and the primary key for the share table, as you notice down here, is SHR code. Please note that it is character data type, so I'm going to have quotes, single or double quotes. When one queries on the primary key, we only get back one row. Let's say, for instance, we actually want multiple rows where we're querying on multiple primary keys. There are a couple of ways to do this. This is a query to retrieve all the columns from the table share where share code is either AR or BE or NG. This returns to me 3 rows with the primary key AR, BE, or NG. Another way to write this is using the IN or the includes operator. In allows you to specify the multiple options AR, BE, NG, giving you the same result but in the form of a slightly simpler query. The not in operator reverses the result. In this case, the not in operator gives us the inverse, so it gives us those rows where the primary key is not AR, not BE, or not NG. One can also order the results that we get out from a query. Please notice, in the generalized query select star from share, the results are ordered according to alphabetical order of share code. One can change the ordering of the results by using order by. The order by clause allows us to change the ordering, and we need to specify the column by which we want something ordered. Let's say, for instance, SHR price or the share price. We will now see that the results from the share table are ordered by share price in ascending order. The default ordering for order by is ascending. If one wants to flip it, you add a DESC or descending at the end of the column name. And so now we have share price ordered descending. One can actually order by multiple columns, either ascending or descending. One can also perform calculations as part of SQL select queries. For instance, let's say I want to select the name of the shares, the share firm, and I'm interested in the values of shares. How much does Patagonia, what is the value of my Patagonia tea stock versus Canadian sugar versus the rest? In this case, I can take the share price and multiply it by the SHR QTY. Price multiplied by quantity gives you the value of a share. I can run calculations like this. We notice that both of those have been multiplied and displayed over here. Now, from a reporting perspective and a managerial perspective, having a column look like that does not look too appealing. One can actually change that . We can multiply these two columns and say that this column is going to have a different header. This does not change the name of the column in the actual database, but as it's reported out, we see value of shares. I see value of shares displayed instead of this multiplied column header. As you can see, I have value of shares right there displayed. Similarly, I can change share firm as that as well. And so now I have name of stock and value of shares, or name of share, value of shares, however one wants to do it. And so one can run simple arithmetic calculations in SQL queries as well. There are a variety of functions that we can also use in SQL. One of the functions is known as a count function. For instance, select count of star from share does something specific. I am counting star, or I'm counting the number of rows, and so what I'm going to see is a number, 10. There are 10 rows in this table called share. I might, for instance, want the average share price, and so there is a function called average that allows me to get the average price of shares. There are other functions such as select max, min, that allow you to get max and min values of share price or whichever column you choose from the share table. One can also create subqueries within SQL. A subquery is a query within a query. For instance, let's say we wanted those shares whose price was greater than the average price of all shares. To get the average price of all shares, one might actually write a query like this. So this query tells us that the average share price is 33.70400. I'm just going to take that number down. That's the average price of all shares. If I wanted shares whose price was greater than that average, I might say something like select star from share where the share price is greater than that average value, 33.70400. And so we see shares whose price is greater than average. Now, notice that we've taken this and we've said there are two steps to this. One is to calculate the average price of shares, and then to find shares whose price is greater than that average. We can combine these two queries together as follows, creating what is in fact a subquery. Notice that there are two queries, an outer query and an inner query. The inner query is referred to as a subquery. It returns a value 33.70400, and that value is compared to the share price of shares in the outer query. Giving us essentially the same result. Regular expressions are a way to do pattern matching within text data in SQL. Sometimes we are looking for certain string characteristics, string patterns, some text as part of our search, and regular expressions allow us to look for those patterns. For instance, since share firm is a text column, I'm going to be using share firm as an example. Share firm regular expression, let's say Ruby. So show me all the columns of shares where the name of the firm, share firm, has the pattern Ruby in it. In this case, I'm going to get only one row, which is Abyssinian Ruby. Another regular expression pattern allows us to look for different combinations. So in this case, I might be interested in looking for Ruby or gold. This allows me to look for either Ruby or gold within share firm, returning to me these two. One can also look for specific patterns that start a string. For instance, like this. The caret operator indicates the start of a string. Find those firms that start with an SR. And so I have Sri Lankan gold. While starting off a string with a pattern is one option, one can also look for patterns that end a string. The dollar indicator means at the end of the string. In this case, I'm looking for those shares where the name of the share ends with an E. In this case, I get Nigerian geese. The distinct operator allows me to eliminate duplicate rows as I am querying a table. In this case, my query is select distinct SHRPE from share. What this allows me to do is to pick up distinct values of SHRPE. Not all the values of SHRPE, but the distinct versions. In this case, I'm going to get 8 rows returned down here. These 8 rows are not all the rows of the table. Some of these values of SHRPE are duplicated, and those have been eliminated. The between while operator allows me to specify a range as I'm retrieving rows. In this case, I'm retrieving all the columns from the share table where the share price is between 10 and 20. In this case, I get only one row. In addition to creating tables, inserting data, selecting data, one can also use SQL to delete and update data in tables. To delete data from tables, one can use the delete from statement. One needs to specify the table one wants to delete from, and one needs to specify the specific row that one wants to delete. In this case, if I ran the statement delete from share where SHR code is equal to BE, it would delete the row where the SHR code is BE. I in fact don't want to do this, and so I'm not going to execute this statement. One can also use SQL to update data. The update statement is as follows. I want to update a table, in this case let's say share, and set the value of something. Let's say I want to set the share price to earnings ratio to some specific value, 9.99. But I want to pick the row where I want this to happen. This would update share price to earnings to be 9.99 in the share table where the share code is BE. Again, I'm not going to be running this statement as this alters the table, and this is one of those tables that gets used by a lot of other classes, and so I'm not going to be changing any of the data in there. This shows you some of the SQL that we can write. Thank you so very much for your attention. Please let me know if you have any questions.